joined on the line by Rachel White, who is our E-rate specialist, who also works with us over at K-12 High Speed Network. And so Rachel is probably going to be able to answer with much more clarity than I would some of the questions you may have with regards to E-rate, which will play a role in today's session. So, so I also want to make sure we welcome Rachel and go ahead and get started. So introductions, you know what, I'm also probably joined on the line by Terry. I know she may be coming a little bit late. I do not believe that Luis Wong will be available. He is, I think, busy at the moment. But, you know, several of us are from K-12 HSN will be kind of hopefully jumping in or out of the conversation today. In terms of focal points, really this is one of the, you know, this is a little bit different from the previous webinars where we were trying to give a lot of information, trying to get everybody kind of calibrated to what the process was like. Really for today, it's just a matter of introducing to where we're at, where we're going. And, you know, so some of the focal points for today, we're going to look at what the procurement process it looks like. If you're unfamiliar with it, we'll look at the scenic RFP. Take a look at the current status of our applicants, next steps, the ranking process, the timeline, and we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. So for the procurement process, you know, I don't know if we clarified this, you know, earlier. I'm pretty sure we did mention this. You know, so a consortium was formed, and that was the reason we needed a letter of agency from all the districts that had applied. You know, some of you may have been called, you know, even as late as mid-October to get some of those LOAs in. We needed those on file in order to proceed with the consortium so that we could obviously file through E-rate. So each LEA, each school district that submitted a site or had a site in the process, whether or not they were initially aware, was notified, and we actually had to place them onto that consortium. The unique part this year as compared to, for example, participating under the previous broadband infrastructure grant from last year was that we had the EPC, the EPIC portal that we had to file through. So a little bit of a logistical change for us as well as for the applicants. But it looks like for the most part, everybody was able to get in, and for those that weren't, we're working with them to make sure that everything is in order. Again, that's the reason for the LOA. One of the things that, you know, we've stated, and we'll state again, the LOA is non-binding. So this was just, it's an exploratory phase. This is just to allow us to be able to actually put you into that consortium, put you on this RFP, and see where it all kind of shakes out over the next month or so. So it doesn't mean that you have to do this. You know, in some cases we were, you know, we reached out to folks and they said, well, we're also, you know, potentially, you know, going to file for E-rate and doing other things, or, you know, we had talked with a provider, and that's fine. Again, so all of this is purely exploratory at this point, and, you know, obviously gives us an opportunity to move forward. The one thing I have to state for sure is that being a member of the consortium does not guarantee that the grant has been awarded to that particular site. Obviously, the real issue is going to be whether or not service providers are actually going to be able to bid on these particular projects. And so, again, kind of connected back to the whole thing of being exploratory, we're still going to have to wait and see until the RFP closes before we can obviously make announcements and things of that nature. So it's obviously a good thing that if your sites or some of your sites are in this process, but again, nothing is guaranteed at this point. The scenic RFP was actually, you know, kind of finalized, or what we call Exhibit D was published on October 19th. One, you know, big kind of caveat that we're recommending is we do want districts to proceed in filing for their own E-rate. The reason for this is final awards are not going to be made until February of 2016. And so as a result, you know, we don't want a site or a district to be in a position where they can't proceed, they're not awarded, and they didn't file for that site or for any kind of infrastructure, you know, as a result of kind of waiting on this process. And And so, we definitely want to encourage you to do that. And, if it all works out in the end, fantastic. If it doesn't, then obviously you're kind of protected. There's some buffer there between the grant and what you're doing individually within your own districts. So again, RFP was posted. It's going to be posted actually today. The Exhibit D was actually completed earlier last week. Bidders conferences were also held last week in 3 separate locations, and this was to apprise service providers of what the grant was all about. Obviously, some of them were familiar with the previous round, but obviously some of the details may have changed with regards to how we were going to proceed with, with engineering and where sites were supposed to be connected. That was a little bit different. And that's going to close on December 4th. So really not too far away from us. We're a little bit, more than a month away. But in this particular kind of somewhat kind of quiet space where all this processing is taking place, we're going to have to, get our ducks in a row and make sure everything is in order, and then proceed with, with ranking and all these other things once the RFP closes on the 4th. So that's really going to be the next major milestone for us. So in terms of adding sites to the RFP, just some of the things that we undertook so that you're kind of familiar with what we did in the process. So obviously the EPC verification, Rachel White, who is on the line, played a huge role in this, as well as our E-rate consultants. So we had to do EPC verification for each of the school districts. We also had to do location and logic checks for A and Z locations, and we're hopeful that everything is in order, although we're always kind of encouraging all the sites, all the districts, to make sure that they're also kind of informing us if there's anything they see that might be off. Again, so we're looking at things like physical addresses, and that's why we were asking questions in the middle of the process about where would you connect to based on your kind of expertise in your local area. And we also had to do CDS code cleanups. So, just a variety of different things to try to get the data in order. And so if it seemed like there was a lull in terms of information coming from us or communication, we were kind of in the mix of a variety of different things to try to get all this information up and ready to go. And obviously there's additional data elements. We were trying to, do latitude and longitude lookups and a variety of different things. And so again, the idea here was we were trying to make sure the data was as clean as possible so that when they went on to the RFP, service providers knew exactly where and what they were bidding on for this particular process. In terms of current status, 70% of the site applicants were actually added to the RFP. So what you're looking at right there are kind of the breakdown of the numbers. So 15% from priority 1 in priority 1, 22% in priority 2, 8% priority 2B, and 27% in priority 3. So out of the volume of sites that we received at the beginning of the application process, the vast majority of them were actually able to move on to the RFP, at least currently, right? And again, what we talked about earlier, there's no great guarantee at this point, but that's a good sign. And so, again, right now we're kind of in the middle of allowing service providers to kind of evaluate, analyze, and determine whether or not they're going to be able to bid on these particular projects. But we had a good distribution for the most part in terms of the different priority ranges. Obviously, if you recall what we had mentioned earlier, priority 1 is obviously our #1 focus. And that's going to include sites that actually, did not receive bids from the previous round of grants. And those are those that are under 20 kilobits per second. Priority 2 is between 20 and 100 per student. Priority 2B are those with unscalable fibers or unscalable solutions, and priority 3 is anything above 100, really. So next steps for all of us. So right now, again, what's going to happen is we're going to have to evaluate bids from service providers after December 4th. And so, again, if there's kind of this kind of semi-communication lull, that's the reason for it. Is again, the big milestone is the close of the RFP. We're going to determine final awardees based on that RFP, and so we're going to have to do some evaluation and some ranking and some determination at that point. And so it is unlikely, at least from what we're hearing at this point, that we're going to make any announcements before the end of 2015. I think when the RFP does close in December, early December, we'll reach out to everybody with some additional kind of explanatory information and just kind of updates. Once the awardee list is completed, we will distribute MOUs to all awarded LEAs. And one thing about the MOU is in there we're going to include all the cost calculations that we are aware of for every single site, right? So if it's Imperial District, for example, and they have 6 sites in the process, we'll include in there the calculations for each of those sites, including the non-recurring cost, the monthly recurring cost, the cost of the equipment, if we have it at that point. Pretty much anything that we have available to us we'll include in there. We're also going to place, obviously, or put the information again on the connection locations so that you're aware. And so again, we want to make sure that that MOU is sufficient so that you can obviously go back to your board and get approval for the project if obviously we're at that point down the line. So MOUs will probably be coming out once all of that is kind of squared away, and that would probably be at some point in early 2016. Exact dates are probably elusive to us at this point based on still having to go through all the evaluations and ranking. We'll also have to finalize all that information and proceed with projects and contracts once all the MOUs are in place. Final award announcements are expected to be made in February of 2016. And one of the things that we wanted to avoid this year as compared to last year was we want to make sure we give ourselves enough buffer space to kind of coordinate all those things. And so right now we're saying that that's going to be February, potentially slightly earlier, but just to kind of put everybody on the same kind of timeline, that's kind of what we're looking at. One kind of note at the bottom you'll notice here in red is that additional information may be requested from awarded sites or from sites in general, and that may include things like what your existing equipment looks like, what your existing what your existing space looks like. So last year we had something called a readiness survey that went out. We're unsure if that's going to go out this year, but we do want to alert you to the fact that additional information may be asked of you, and that's just to kind of, again, to help us kind of calibrate and get the list in order so that we can make final decisions. And it's not something that anybody's done wrong or anything like that. In terms of ranking and funding, again, we've mentioned this a couple times on the previous webinars, but if insufficient funds are available, there will be a funding priority kind of ranking process that'll be used to exhaust the funds. And obviously, again, priority 1, priority 2, priority 2B, and then priority 3 is going to be that rank order. And we'll be looking at things like the bandwidth ratios and enrollments and a variety of other things in conjunction with our stakeholders. So you'll notice there on that second bullet, so it's not only K-12HSN, but we'll be working obviously with the Department of Ed, the State Board of Education, and other technical leads throughout California. In terms of a timeline, just to kind of help with kind of understanding where we're at, so we're always amazed at how fast the time flies. It does not feel like we just recently launched this, but we really, really did. So the application period ended in September. We're already kind of at the end of October, and so the RFP is about to be posted and finalized. Eligible site list is published and district COEs are notified, so you all received a communication from Magali Mesa at some point last week about that. We just held the bidders conferences So service providers right now are undertaking the analysis of these eligible sites, and procurement is underway. That cycle is going to end on the 4th. Scoring and ranking is going to be undertaken. Grant awards will be kind of announced again in February, and then in spring we'll have project implementation between April and June, and that's kind of the hope. And that's just implementation. Obviously, that's not finalization, and that obviously may stretch until late 2016, 2017. So we've got our hands full just as much as as I'm sure you all do. And I think the one thing that we're always advocating is if you have questions throughout the process, or you just want a kind of quick status update, don't hesitate to kind of just let us know. Again, we're going to do our best to send those types of communications out to you. Magali does an absolutely fantastic job of notifying everybody and putting all the details that we have in those emails. But if there's something that you need to know or you feel you need to know, just feel free to reach out to us either via email or phone, and we'll do our best to get you the answer. Again, right now the major milestone is going to be the close of RFP on December 4th, and we're going to have additional information to process at that point. So right now, again, there's kind of not a lull, so to speak, in terms of we're not doing anything. It's just we're kind of waiting on that, and we're kind of doing some stuff behind the scenes to make sure everything is up and running. At this point, I'm going to, that's pretty much as much as we wanted to say, and really one of the benefits of doing these webinars to allow you to ask questions. And so I'm going to advocate that if you have questions, that you send those in either through the Q&A or the chat, and we're going to take those as they come in. We do have a couple that are already kind of posted, so we're going to take those first, but definitely ask if you've got anything on your mind. If you have anything related to E-rate, again, we have our E-rate specialist, Rachel, on the line with us. And again, we want to make this as useful for you as possible and answer any questions that you guys may have. So let's see. First question, can service providers with air fiber bid? The answer is yes. Obviously, the most sought-after solutions are going to be, fiber installations. But we are aware that in many cases that may not be the case. There may not be infrastructure on the ground. Service providers, may not be able to get out to particular locations. Sites may be geographically isolated. There's a variety of reasons for that. So just as we did last year, we did and will entertain fiber or air fiber solutions, as you're calling them, or wireless solutions. And several projects actually last year were awarded with those types of project types. So those sites are actually going to be part of what we're moving forward for this round as well, because we would love to get fiber installed for those sites, but that may not be the case in all cases. So definitely, if you have local providers who have wireless service, microwave connections, whatever it may be, definitely encourage them to apply, and we'll see how it all shakes out once the bids are all tallied up and we see what's actually been evaluated for each of these individual sites. So we have another question here. One-time build cost with no ongoing service provider cost may be possible for some sites. Data communications contractors, as opposed to strictly service providers, may be able to provide the build. How should this scenario be approached before December 4th? Data communications contractors, as opposed to strictly service providers, may be able to provide the build. How should this scenario be approached?
So this is Terry. I would say if a service provider has a plan to build some service, that just needs to be submitted via the bid process, and I would explain that there is no MRC, no monthly recurring cost, and what we've asked of the service providers, so that we can do a comparison that's not more of a headache than it would be anyway. we've asked service providers not to remove rows or columns and not to add columns or rows, except that if you need space to explain something, you may add columns out to the far right where they're, you're not changing anything that is in the existing Exhibit D, but you may add rows out to the right, not rows, columns, and install in there any explanation that you need to about why the service is free going forward. There's no monthly recurring. So those are not standard. It would be helpful if you can make sure we understand what you're proposing.
Another question, besides the WAN circuits that may need to be upgraded under this program, can you give us an idea if the award would include hardware that would be needed to make use of the higher bandwidth circuits, such as routers, switches, and firewalls? So the answer to that is the internal equipment, we are currently not, that's currently not the focus. The equipment is obviously to have the circuits be able to pass traffic, and any necessary equipment to do that between the A and Z locations is what we purchased last year under the grant, and we're expecting to continue with that kind of focus this year. However, that is potentially subject to change based on advice or discussions at the state level. So we're kind of in the middle of determining that at this point. But for now, we're going to say that internal infrastructure is probably not going to be the main priority for us moving forward. And those are things. Some of those things you'll have to handle on your own.
Well, if it's for local distribution across your campus, the wireless infrastructure or something like that, that's not our focus. But a switch or a router necessary to receive, make traffic accessible on your campus, those things would be included. And I can tell you that in BIIG 1.0, we are having a contractor on our behalf go look at the site, determine what equipment is necessary. They make a recommendation to the project management team here at K-12 High-Speed Network, and that equipment is being ordered. What we did not take advantage of in BIIG 1.0, and we are doing in BIIG 2.0, is we're asking the vendors to propose equipment with the service so that the E-rate subsidy program can be leveraged both on the circuit and on the equipment. So for those commercial providers that already do that, it won't be anything different. They'll just propose the circuit plus the CPE, the equipment that belongs at the customer end. I think CPE means customer premises equipment. So if the commercial provider bids those things as a bundle, then E-rate will be secured on all of them, stretching the state dollar even further. If we get a bid that includes CPE and another one that doesn't, probably there's going to be some, in the rubric, there will be some extra points for the equipment being bid by the commercial provider. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to install a circuit and have it not perform for you because there's some piece of equipment that the applicant site is missing. So whether it's through the initial E-rate bid that will close December 4th, or a follow-up procedure that will involve a contractor working on our behalf out at the school sites, we're going to make that circuit work for you. We're just hoping to leverage E-rate on the premises and equipment of the customer by having that bundled into the quote that the commercial provider gives to Scenic.
Follow-up question to that, if a tower is necessary to get service to the site, would that be something the grant would pay for?
Yes. If there's no alternative other than wireless and tower construction or tower rent is required in order to get service to the site, we want as many of the costs as possible up front and as low a recurring cost that the district will take over at July 1st of 17, those recurring costs, we want those as low as possible. But certainly if the only way to serve a site involves wireless and access to a tower, those expenses would be considered a grant expense.
If we are currently under contract, will there be funds for early termination fees if the provider changes? That's a great question, and one of the things that we have consistently grappled with, I think, throughout Big One, and we're going to have to probably grapple with this in obviously Big Two. One of the reasons that we had asked for invoices and contracts and potential early termination fees was so we can kind of brace ourselves, or at least pre-calculate that based on the information you provided us. We obviously do not want to put districts or sites in a bad situation where they're having to pay very large early termination costs. In an ideal world, it'd be nice if the same service provider was awarded as part of the grant. In some cases, that may not be the case, and we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. And I'll see if Terry has additional information in terms of how we've handled some of the existing sites in Big One.
The stakeholders in Sacramento do not like the idea of grant dollars being spent to get a site out of a contract. And having said that, a lot of the sites that have not had an opportunity to scale up the way they needed to using their own resources, if those builds to those places take as long as we know they can take, there's in Big 1.0, if a military base or a railroad line, we need rights of the commercial provider needs to go through rights of way and easements to gain access to do their work. These projects can take a very long time. So we do envision that there's some cases where a 2-year contract may not have much left on it by the time a build is finished under this project. So we're trying to weigh those things. We understand that it's not favored in the eyes of the stakeholders for grant dollars to be spent getting a site out of a contract. That I think we're going to try and avoid that. We won't know in the bid process. We're asking the vendors to give us accurate timelines for when they will have the new circuit installed. So hopefully what we'll be able to give potential awardees is good information on when their new circuit might be available to them. And the program will be paying for the monthly recurring costs for probably a minimum of six, depending on when they go in. July 1st of 17 is when we would want to supersede that contract out of Scenic's name and into the district's name. So that could be 6 months of service or up to a year of service.
When awards are announced, will we, the districts, be responsible for coordinating with service providers, or will service providers be contacted directly by BIIG? We'll be handling most of that. Obviously there will be some contact at the site level, and obviously we're assuming that, we're imagining that a site is awarded and it's been announced. The service provider obviously is going to have to go scout the landscape and determine what they're going to need, and so there will be contact between the service providers and the sites themselves. But in terms of the contracts and scheduling it, all these variety of different things kind of on the back end, KHOHSN, Scenic, anybody involved with the Broadband Infrastructure Improvement Grant will be handling that. You will not have to call the service providers or do anything on that front. Again, depending on what they need, there may be surveys deployed, there may be questionnaires, there may be phone calls or discussions. In some complex connection situations last year, there was repeated conversations and phone calls probably between service providers and someone from KHOHSN or Scenic and the sites or the district. So that is all possible, but in terms of it seems like what you're referring to is kind of the upfront conversations about having to do the scheduling and all this other type of stuff. You really won't have to do that.
The other thing we found in BIIG 1.0 is that for a lot of sites, they don't have anyone with technical expertise that's on site all the time. So we have had a lot of cases where the County Office of Education played a liaison role and was very helpful in terms of meeting up with the site surveyor from the vendor and answering questions on behalf of a smaller school or district that didn't have local technical expertise to answer the questions.
You mentioned that 70% of applicants have been added to the RFP. Does this mean that the other 30% have officially been dropped from consideration? Can we go online and see the current list of applications that are part of the 70%? The answer to both of those, in particular, I'll start with the last one. Yes, absolutely. You can see that list online. So you can see who's been included or is moving forward as part of these eligible sites. For the other 30%, it pretty much does mean that they've been dropped. They're not added to the RFP. And so as a result, there will be no bids for those particular sites that have been left off the list. The majority of those sites were left off as a result of high bandwidth to student ratio or calculations. So we're talking about over 1,000 kilobits per second per student, which exceeds even the CETA recommendation for 2018. And so the majority of those sites have sufficient bandwidth, and that was the reason that they were left off.
And some of them weren't seeking support. They happened to be in a district that was seeking a support for either for the district connection, because that proved to be a bottleneck, or for a different school site in their district. So there are many in that 30% that weren't expecting service anyway. They simply were reported and evaluated because they were part of a district that was in the application.
So I'm clear. My understanding that on-premise hardware at the edge of the network that will be needed to allow the higher bandwidth circuit to provide a benefit will most likely be included. Yes. So anything necessary to pass traffic, any equipment necessary to pass traffic at the given speed, whatever that is, whether it's a gig or whatever, will likely be included. Again, internal networks, internal connections, internal routers, switches, things of that nature. It is less likely, and again, that could switch or change based on conversations in Sacramento with high-level stakeholders. But you're correct in your assumption that, yeah, the equipment at the edge of the network necessary to pass traffic will be included. Are there going to be any more meetings for service providers to attend for more information? If so, when? We do not believe there will be any additional bidders conferences scheduled. I believe one was recorded so that additional service providers who could not make it can actually take a look at that and hear the discussion. We also have a downloadable, kind of PDF of the presentation. So if that is helpful, we can post that as well. And again, we are encouraging folks. You're the best resources in some cases to reach out to the kind of regional providers or local providers who may not be kind of connected to last year's grant or even this year's. And so if you have information that you can provide them and we can provide to you so that you can inform them, please do so that they can, try to get involved in the project and make a bid on some of these.
And the Scenic website has an FAQ, which is not populated yet with questions from last Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but we're in the process of accomplishing that. And in addition to being able to see the session that was recorded in Contra Costa County, we will have a full FAQ up probably by midweek.
If the district is a priority 2 and the schools are priority 3, how will that process play out? Most likely to make the cut. So that's a good question. Really, what the priorities were a matter of ranking and who was going to, kind of be obviously prioritized in terms of the grant funds. If the district is a priority 2, what that means, in all likelihood, is that the district could be a potential bottleneck to sites downstream. And obviously, we took a different approach this year than we did last year, where it was sites were the focus. And this year, we wanted to expand that to include, kind of these district hubs or aggregation points. What that would mean is that the district would take priority in terms of upgrading that particular circuit so that they'll be able to pass the necessary traffic to meet the needs of the sites downstream. If the sites downstream are a priority 3, obviously they'd fall later on in the funding cycle, so to speak, or in terms of priority. But it's possible that they would also be upgraded as well, as long as the funds are stretched sufficiently. All right, let me see if we have any additional questions coming in. Looks like we are caught up at this point. I'll make a last kind of a plea here. If you guys have any additional questions that you'd like to send our way, please do so. If you have any questions with regards to E-rate, please remember we have Rachel White on the line, our E-rate specialist, and she'll be able to answer those. And one thing I do want to kind of go back and kind of reiterate is the idea that we want to encourage sites and LEAs to proceed with filing their own E-rate applications. Again, right now, just because sites or a district site is in this eligible pool does not mean that they're going to be awarded at the end. And so we don't want you to run into a situation where nothing can happen as a result of that. Because again, final awards have not been made. Can you please notify us when FAQs are posted? Can we be emailed a copy of today's PowerPoint? Absolutely, yes. So we'll send a follow-up message to everybody. Probably everybody who's been, same folks that were notified by Magali last week will also be notified with a copy of the presentation. We're also going to include some of the things like the links to the scenic FAQs as well as the bidders conference document. We can actually add those in there so that you can have access to those. And again, we want to make this as transparent and as helpful a process as we can for you. So if there's things that we can do to alleviate stress or pressures, or you need to share some of this information with other folks, we'll gladly do that.
But this webinar was actually focused for applicants. If you're a service provider and you want to make sure we notify you that the FAQs for service providers are posted, why don't you send an email to our helpline. We'll make sure that we get those FAQs. I'm not sure that all applicants are as interested in the FAQs that are created for service providers.
One question, how do we construct that E-rate application for 2016-17?
I'm going to let Rachel speak in a minute, but in general, the Form 470, the initial one that requests the bids, is a scenic form, and as the circuit and its recurring cost transitions to the applicant, the applicant would file a Form 471 that points back to scenic's Form 470 in terms of superseding and taking over the monthly cost under E-rate. That's my impression. Now I'll be quiet and let Rachel correct that if I have it wrong.
Totally agree with what you just said. So in general, the applicant that's part of the BIIG 2.0 process would not be posting on 470 or 471 for 16-17. That would come about in the following E-rate application year, the 17-18. And we will be providing hands-on assistance for those applicants to make sure that they cross all their T's and dot all their I's in this process.
Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome.
Another question, to clarify, if there is a construction cost of digging through a parking lot to get to get the circuit to the school, will that be covered? Yeah, so you know, the cost of the one-time cost of getting the connection there will be covered as part of the grant. And you may have heard Terry allude to, you know, situations last year where we're trying to connect sites through, you know, public lands or protected lands or on a military base. I think we may have seen it all. We've heard of sites having to dig through, you know, or trench through solid rock to get to, you know, a connection in place. So those things will be covered. You know, obviously this is not something that we're going to pass on to you. That this is one of the main focal points of the grant, both last year and this year. Another question, do we assume that we have assistance to upgrade, or do we submit with the current status quo?
You're talking about, it sounds like they're talking about what they put in their E-rate bid for the coming year when they post their upcoming. I would expect what you're going to put on your Form 470, you know, as a fallback position if you're not granted an upgrade via BIIG, would be you know, an upgraded circuit that meets your needs, whether that's 100 megabit or gigabit or, you know, I'm not familiar with school district E-rate applications, but I know on the ones filed by Scenic for this, they seek multiple different speeds. And in 1.0, we were really leaning heavily on installing gigabit circuits. In some cases, we had applicants say, I don't need that much, I've only got 25 students. Could I please have a 100 megabit circuit instead of a gig? So in this iteration, we actually have more flexibility for the vendors to provide different options. I think that question was, what should you propose in your own Form 470? And I would say multiple options that meet the needs for that site.
Okay, looks like we are caught up. If you have any additional questions, now's the time, folks. Go ahead and send those in. You know, if not, we're probably going to wrap this up pretty quickly here. You know, one thing we probably, again, just haven't said is just thank you for obviously being involved in the process and you know, staying on your toes and responding to our questionnaires and things of that nature. I know this process sometimes can get complicated, and everybody's got a lot on their plates at the site and district level, so we appreciate the communications and the responses. That was very, very helpful for us. And again, we may continue to lean on you for that as you know, we go through this process and we need additional information. But definitely thank you, and obviously we're hopeful that everybody's going to get what they need moving forward for the sake of improving what we're offering to our students. It looks like there's no other questions that are coming in. And I definitely just want to say thank you for spending the morning with us, at least this 45 minutes or hour or so. Again, if you have questions after this point, please feel free to reach out to us. You can call or email, and we'll try to be as responsive as possible. Again, the next major milestone will be the close of that RFP on December 4th. And at that point, we will, you know, kind of again begin evaluating and doing what we need to put that final awardee list together. If you're going to be at SETPA in San Diego this year, as some of you will likely be, please feel free to swing by our booth. We'll have a booth there, and we'd love to chat and exchange with you if you have the chance. And so might be a good opportunity for us to interface with a lot of the folks that are in this particular grant opportunity. So with that being said, just thank you for all the information you've provided us, and thank you for being patient with us. And we look forward to communicating with you soon. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.